Welcome to Cardium from RES Medical, the podcast that gets to the heart of travel healthcare and asks, what's your why? With each episode, we explore the topics and issues that impact healthcare professionals in the fields of nursing and allied health. Now, here are your hosts, Sunny and Matt.
Welcome to another episode of Cardium. If you're a subscriber, welcome back. Thank you for being part of the Cardium family. If you're a new listener, thanks for stopping by. We hope you enjoy the podcast, and we would love for you to subscribe so you can enjoy future podcasts. Joined to me today, as always, Sunny.
Hello.
Hi, Sunny. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
Good. I'm really good. I'm really good. I say this about every podcast, but I'm excited about our podcast today. We've got a really important topic to talk about, and I think that it will go a long way with resonating, but really, it's just different than what we've done before.
And, we talk a lot about personally in our conversations, we've talked about what it is to rebuild if we were to lose a job, back in the recession back in 2009, about rebuilding after that. In general, what does someone do when you rebuild from quitting or terminating job? But what does someone do when you rebuild from a natural disaster? And that's what our topic is today. And so today we are speaking with a survivor of the Camp Fire of 2018.
Yeah, I mean, this is, as we mentioned and as talking about it, this is so different than what we've discussed before. And our guest today is Amy Riley, and Amy is a polysom tech, and she's been practicing since 2008. She began her career in Redding, California, and moved to Magalia in 2014 when she took a position with Feather River Hospital in nearby Paradise. The hospital was destroyed in the destructive Camp Fire, which swept through Paradise in November of 2018. After the fire, she turned to travel healthcare and took her first assignment in Hollister, California. She is currently on staff full-time in the sleep lab of Adventist Health Clear Lake, a sister hospital of Feather River. She also works per diem position in Chico, which is closer to her home. Amy is a married mother of two. Welcome, Amy.
Hi there.
Well, I want to give a little bit of background for those who may not be familiar about the fire before we jump into the interview. The Camp Fire was the deadliest and most destructive wildfire in California history and the most expensive natural disaster in the world in 2018 in terms of insured losses. And it's named after Camp Creek Road, its place of origin. The fire started on November 8th, 2018 in Northern California's Butte County. And it was ignited by a faulty electric transmission line. The fire caused at least 85 civilian fatalities. And you have to think about that. And to this day, one person is still missing.
Wow.
And it injured 12 civilians, 2 prison inmate firefighters, and 3 other firefighters. It covered an area of 153,336 acres, almost 240 square miles, and destroyed 18,804 structures, with most of the damage occurring within the first 4 hours. And you think about how quickly that moved. The Camp Fire is also the deadliest wildfire in the United States since the Cloquet Fire in 1918 and is high on the list of the world's deadliest fires as the 6th deadliest U.S. wildfire overall. And so, no further ado, Amy, we'll get started.
All right.
So maybe, Amy, you can, Sunny reading the information here, it's the information that we're talking about is pretty amazing that anybody survived it. It's just devastating. Can you take us through a little bit about what the events leading up to the fire and kind of your day and how everything got started and when things got very real for you?
Well, the fire started about 6:30 in the morning. I was still working at the sleep lab. My shift didn't get over until 7. It was still dark when I left, so nobody even really knew that there was a fire that it even started. PG&E had told us prior to this that there was a 33% chance that they were going to shut off our power. And as a result, we warned our patients in case any of them wanted to reschedule and come back another time. Out of the 4 patients we had, 1 took that opportunity. And so we had 3 patients to 2 techs that night. When I got off work, it was still dark, so still no signs of a fire. I drove probably about a mile from the hospital when I noticed a single fire engine with his lights on. because it was just one engine, I figured it was just a medical aid, just something standard, and continued on home. It wasn't until I started driving up my street, which was about 15 minutes later, that I looked up at the sky and was like, oh my gosh, that looks like it could be a fire, but it looks so bad that I figured there was no way it could be real. And so I just figured it was the colors of the sunrise, and I parked my truck, went in the house, and helped my husband get the kids ready for school. About 30 minutes later, he left with the kids, and then after dropping them off, called me asking me if there was a fire. I told him that I thought the same thing and that it was most likely just the sunrise, and he said, no, it really does look like smoke. Traffic is kind of moving slowly into Paradise. I think you should look into this. So I told him okay, hung up the phone, looked on Facebook, and within a minute I saw that there was a fire where Concow and Pulga are, which is just basically on the other side of the canyon from the hospital. And so I immediately called him back, knowing that what I saw was real, and said that yes, there is a fire. He's still continuing on towards Paradise to go to work in Chico. And I told him, I think you need to turn around and come home. Yeah. He snapped a photo of what he was seeing, because he did see flames at a distance, and sent it to me and asked me how much gas I had in the truck. And I said only about a quarter of a tank to an eighth of a tank. And he told me that I needed to go gas it up. So I hung up with him, sent that picture to work, telling them that they needed to pay attention to this, and they said that they were aware of it. I quickly got dressed, ran out to my truck, looked up at the sky, and there was like no doubt that was a fire. Jumped in my truck, drove probably faster than I was supposed to the gas station, expecting a huge long line. Luckily, I was only the third vehicle in line to get gas. After or during when I was getting gas, I'm looking up at the sky, and as well as the rest of us there, just thinking how awful it looked, and I was thinking my next step was to go to the school and pick up my kids. About the time I got back in my truck, work was calling me. This was probably about 8:15-ish, telling me, don't come to work, we're being evacuated. And that was just one of those phone calls they didn't have to make, because common sense later would tell me there's no way you're getting back into Paradise anyway. As I was leaving the gas station, I noticed my husband in the driveway, so I at least knew where he was at. I called him to let him know I was getting the kids, drove to the school, ran up into the office, which was a scene of just complete chaos, told them I was taking my kids, which they, of course, said was fine, ran over to my daughter's class, picked her up first, and then we ran up to my son's class and picked up my son, and then ran back to the truck and drove home to start packing as much stuff as we could, which we started with all of our animals and supplies, minus a couple other things. And I had at the time 3 dogs and a bunny. And that meant 2 of my dogs had to ride in my husband's car with the bunny, and I had the 2 kids. My husband drove our truck with my pup and his crate in the bed of the truck. And we probably met up together at about 8:30. Around 9 o'clock is when I started getting the notice from my phone, whether it be text message, email, voicemail, about 9:15, 9:30, telling us that we needed to evacuate. We were still getting stuff together, and we've pretty much finished at about 10 o'clock, and the whole time we're just watching the news as much as we could, which I could not focus on at all. I couldn't sit still. I had to keep doing something.
So,
meanwhile, my kids are scared.
Amy, I'm
Go
sorry
ahead.
to interrupt you here, but how much time would you say has elapsed between the moment that you noticed, hey, this isn't the sun, this is, smoke, to now at this moment, I've got my kids, I've packed everything up. How much time right now has elapsed, would you say?
Oh, gosh. Probably at least a good 2 hours.
Okay, so this
But
is
part of
moving
that-
pretty fast, and you've gotten as much as you can, everyone that's important to you and everything that you need packed up, gassed up, and just ready to hit go when needed?
Yeah, but the problem is that traffic was so backed up that we couldn't even leave.
Okay.
And then the power went out around 10 o'clock, which
Okay.
meant we lost access to TV, phones, everything.
Okay.
And it really wasn't until probably 11 o'clock that we started moving out with our trailer.
So Amy, we're Sonny and I are both parents, and obviously you got your kids out of school. How old are your kids at this time?
They are 10 and 7.
So we're talking fourth grade, maybe first grade. Is that what grades they were in when you had to get them out?
No, my daughter was in 3rd grade and my son was in kindergarten.
Okay. And so just kind of along the same lines, as a parent, what were you saying to the kids when you were getting them out of class? Was it, we've got to go right now, and the other students watching this parent come in and evacuate their couple kids? Was there panic in the classroom as well?
Well, luckily, or not luckily, depending on how you look at it, the school knew that there was a fire. In fact, school started about 8:05 at Cedarwood, and they started pulling all the kids into classes before school technically started. They were at the time trying to figure out buses to start evacuating the kids. And I will tell you that they changed the location of where they were taking the kids to at least 5 times that day.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
And I do have friends that lived with us for a while after the fire whose son was on the Ponderosa Elementary School bus, which is the school bus that you guys may have heard about, where the bus driver took his shirt off and 2 teachers pretty much shredded into pieces, and then with a single bottle of water got the pieces wet to give all the kids because they were passing out from smoke inhalation.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Just trying to evacuate. And my friends didn't even learn where he was until probably about 4 o'clock that afternoon because they could not get to his school in time, unfortunately.
That's
Wow.
crazy.
So you've got the kids, you've got the animals, everybody's loaded up. It's about 9:30, would you say now?
For the most part, we finished probably about 9:30, yeah. But we just couldn't leave until after probably 11, and this is when my kids are panicking, going, I want to go, I want to leave. And I had to tell them, unfortunately, there's no place we can go right now because traffic is so backed up. They did start calming down once we did start moving.
Yeah.
And I honestly cannot blame them for being scared because all we could do is look up at the sky at the smoke, not knowing how close is the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And we really didn't even have a true magnitude of the situation until later, when we were able to learn the whole timeline of the fire and how it even hit Paradise. Because it really was not the main fire that hit Paradise. It was so windy that day that it was pretty much just spot fires off the main fire that was igniting all over Paradise, which is why it burned so quickly.
And so when you finally got going, where did you head?
So the only way we had to go is, and this is the things to living in a mountain area, but we had 2 exits. You can go into Paradise, which obviously was not an option, or you could head north up to Butte Meadows and then cut over to Highway 32 and then down to Chico. And that's the way that we ended up having to take. And keep in mind, I didn't sleep this entire time. Like, I got off my shift, which was a 12-hour shift, and I'm doing all of this on pure adrenaline.
Sure.
I, at least because I'm a mom, knew I needed to grab bottles of water and snacks for the kids. We did end up stopping just before Sterling City at a big, huge open area because we all needed to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And luckily I had a trailer, so we could do that and then continue on. But it took at least 5-6 hours to get from our house to my in-laws' house in Durham, which normally if we were going to take that way to go there, which we would consider the extreme scenic route, would take 1 hour and 45 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
And
so you made it to your in-laws' house then in Durham then, you said?
Yeah, eventually. But I will say that when we were on 32 and finally, like, at first we're heading away from the fire and now the sky is like blue, but then as we got on 32 heading towards Chico, we're going back into the smoke, and I kept seeing engines going down 32 the same direction that we were going, And because I knew the direction that the fire was traveling, I was afraid that when they got down to the base of 32 and Chico, that they were going to turn us back around, because I was afraid that the fire was coming into that canyon. Yeah. And luckily they did not. But it was quite the ordeal just trying to get through Chico also and get to my in-laws' house. And then shortly after we got there, we got notice that we were supposed to evacuate there because the fire had jumped 99, which is the closest highway to their house. And I was so done running that I said, if there is any reason whatsoever to believe that we're going to be okay, I need to know, because I do not want to go anywhere. I was tired of fighting through the traffic. I think I was finally getting exhausted from just being awake that whole time, plus the adrenaline running a toll on me, that I ended up calling up a friend in Red Bluff to say, hey, if we do have to evacuate, do you have room for us? And she did, to the point that she said, you don't even have to call, just please show up. And luckily we were okay, and we're able to just stay at my in-laws' house.
Yeah. So, you're here, you're at your in-laws' time. How long before you and the children are able to just kind of digest and relax, like just to calm down from the fire?
It was at least a good 2 to 3 days.
Okay.
Only because I didn't even feel safe. I don't think any of us did.
I bet.
Knowing that the fire was, jumped the highway. I only got 2 hours of sleep that night, and everybody was literally glued to the TV. Now, my sister-in-law and my in-laws had already had a trip planned to Florida prior to all this, and they were supposed to leave that night.
Sure, yeah.
And they almost canceled it because they didn't even know if they could get to Sacramento because of all the traffic, but they ended up going anyway, which was like 3 a.m., and that also is to kind of give us the house to ourselves.
And I, like my son, we're in Midwest, so, you get tornadoes, and my son, to this day, he hears about tornado warnings, and he's 17 now, and he still gets a little frazzled. And, some time has passed. Your kids, if they hear fires close by, what are their responses now?
They want to know how close it is. And even I'm the same way. When I was working down in the Bay Area, anytime I saw smoke, I wanted to know how close it was. Do I need to start evacuating?
Yeah.
We're definitely on edge. It's not like before. And I used to be a volunteer with the fire department.
Sure.
And I felt like, I had a pretty good understanding of when you need to worry and when you don't need to worry. And that night was just a no-brainer. It was, you don't wait for your evacuation notice. You start packing and moving now. Fortunately, we lived in Magalia, so we had more time, but there's people in Paradise that didn't even have that time.
No, you start
It was literally, if you see it, it's too late. You need to start moving now.
Yeah. So,
and I think
go ahead.
That's also what people don't understand too, with how, because you hear people all the time complaining, they didn't give us enough notice. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is, no one has ever been in that kind of situation where the fire moved so quickly that by the time they realized it was time to start announcing evacuation, it was already too late by the time they even saw the fire. I can't describe how fast this fire moved. And, I really believe that the emergency workers did everything possible, everything that they could to let everybody know as quick as they could to get out. Yeah. It was just an impossible situation, though.
Yeah. So now what? What is your life like now after the fire? You've what's rebuilding looking like at this point?
So Paradise is slowly rebuilding. We still don't have very many businesses. You do see here and there a house that's being rebuilt, which is great. My friends ended up buying another house further up Magalia. So they're doing great. We're still in our house. We did end up replacing our floors, and had to have a not a humidifier, a air purifier in here for a couple days just because of all the smoke damage. But that's an entirely another subject.
Were you able to go back to the hospital?
No.
Okay.
So the ER is the only part of the hospital that is technically okay. The lower part of the hospital, which is also the older part of the hospital, is completely destroyed. A lot of the outbuildings are also destroyed, but because of the damage to the roof, it's created a lot of leaks within the hospital and mold damage. So that's why the ER is the only building that is technically okay. The sleep lab did survive. They did have some damage, which I'm guessing is to the roof. But our medical director ended up relocating to Fresno, so I don't see any time in the near future that the sleep lab's going to come back.
So, Amy, since the sleep lab closed, what happened to your coworkers that were working in the sleep lab with you? Because I know that you said that you were on shift with a few other people that night. Obviously, there was people there that were working.
So
did everybody relocate?
Yeah, everybody did. My coworker, she was actually asleep when the fire happened and had to have people calling her to wake her up and get out. She did lose her house. The two guys that I texted that morning that were working the day shift, both of them lost their houses. They're usually the ones that score the studies, and after they relocated, I took that part to score all the studies we had up until the fire. But pretty much I would say at least half to 2/3 of our staff lost homes, but they're all okay. They've relocated elsewhere. Some already had like a per diem job or another full-time job elsewhere, so they're okay there. As for my coworker that I was working with, she's still not back to work.
Wow. It's fresh for you, I'm sure. So I'm sure it's very, very real, very fresh. How has this changed you? Because you're still practicing and you're still a polysom tech practicing today. How has this prepared you professionally and made you a better healthcare provider with continuing to practice and knowing that, there's always there's other things that could come up?
Right. So I always had the mindset of before, anytime you had a difficult patient, you moan and groan and go, I wish somebody else could take this patient or something. But I think since the fire, I kind of have more sympathy and more empathy for people's situations. They always say, everybody has a story on how they got to where they are. And, I'm a firm believer now that that is true. I mean, I've had some of those patients since then where, I look at them and go, okay, they can be difficult, but honestly, they end up being one of my favorite patients ever now. And because, I talk to them, I, find out their story, where they're coming from. And, the next thing we know, we're like buddies. It's not just patient and caregiver, it's something more than just that.
And Amy, in order for you to get back up on your feet, what type of work did you have to seek, or how did you get back rebuild in that aspect?
So originally after the fire, and I realized that my position at the hospital was not going to be there after February 5th, I was already applying for other jobs that, whether it be an office worker, monitor tech, like anything at one of the local hospitals. And although my application usually would go at least to the hiring manager, it would never go past that. And it was getting to the point where I just did not want to spend a bunch of time on unemployment. Okay. And so I figured at that point, my only option was to get into travel. Okay. And that's how I started out with travel, talking with Katie Lutmer first, and she was very, very informative, spent as much time as I needed on the phone, just answering all my questions, my concerns, because, I had no idea how the pay structure was with travel. And then from there, I met Suzanne, my account manager, and ended up just getting involved in travel. And luckily, I ended up choosing an assignment at another small hospital, which for me I figured was the best choice for me, especially diving into this when I've never done it before. And it was a very good assignment. I loved the director that I had. They understood my family situation. They let me choose my days, days off pretty much. And, if I had something going on with one of my kids at home, they would let me change my schedule so that I could be home with them for that.
They sound like a good staff there. Was that the assignment you took in Hollister?
Yes.
Yeah. They sound like a really good staff there. Did any of the folks in Hollister, were any of them at Feather River, or was that none of them?
No, it's too far away.
Yeah. So what's the outlook going forward for you? I know travel was new to you because of the disaster. What are your thoughts now, and what are you kind of, if you had to plan out your next 3 to 5 years, is travel something you want to continue to explore, or is it something that kind of fills the need right now, but you'd really like to be able to at least settle down somewhere?
So right now, it's definitely something that I would consider if the situation made it so that I needed to do it. But ultimately, I needed a permanent position because of the benefits. The kids and my husband are all on my benefits, and so that's why I took the job at Clear Lake. Ultimately, I did put in an application at UC Davis, which is a lead senior sleep tech job, which I'm hoping that works out, because that will at least take about...
Do you hear that, UC Davis?
Huh?
Fingers crossed. Do you hear that, UC Davis?
Thanks. But that would take at least 30 minutes off my commute. We just recently decided to pull my trailer home, and I ended up getting a commuter car. So for right now, I'm just going to commute the 2 hours to Clear Lake and 2 hours home.
But you know what, Amy? I think you bring up a great story, and I don't want to downplay it at all and call this a story, because it is actually an experience for you that no one else has. And I can't put words to it. I can't say that I can understand what you went through. I think it gives someone who is listening maybe an understanding that, wow, if I'm going through something, if I lose something like a job, or if I'm displaced in some way, there is an answer out there. And I kind of resonate with you because, we talked about at the beginning of this episode where Matt and I had talked about the 2009 recession. My family went through that, and we lost our home. And mom to mom, me to you, it was no thought to me. I took temp jobs too. I was a temp worker. So I took my own assignment, if you will. And so I understood that. And so I relate to you in that respect. I don't know about the fear factor that you went through, and my heart goes out to you and your family. But I do understand that kind of primal instinct that I need to do whatever I need to do to protect my family. And so I think, to those listeners out there, you bring up a good point, is that there are options out there. That doesn't have to be waiting for a hiring manager to pick your resume out there. That a temporary assignment is an option for you until you find a full-time option for you. And you're making that work, because sometimes you do what you need to do to survive. And so thank you for bringing that option out there.
Yeah, I think it really it's interesting to when you start talking about not only the work aspect of doing what you need to do, but she was doing what she needed. Amy, you were doing what you need to do during the fire.
Yes.
You've got your children in your vehicle, your husband, you're either following your husband or your husband's following you. It's an emergency.
Yes.
I think the motherly instincts were pretty strong there. And I want to talk I'd like you to talk a little bit about those motherly instincts and how you handled the time when you had to start traveling, because that's a little bit different when you don't get to see your kids every day.
Especially after that.
Yeah, especially after that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you guys coped with that when you needed to take that job in Hollister?
So I kind of feel like things were a little bit better then, because at least I would be gone for 8 days at a time and then be home for 6, where I'm not working. I can give them my undivided attention. before having to go back to Hollister, which is at least 4 hours away from home that I would end up traveling one way. And then, of course, the 4 hours back home. And I would usually come back home right after a shift. And I did travel with my puppy at the time. He's a German Shepherd. And so usually after work, we would go hiking before I would go back to the trailer and try and go to sleep. And that was my way of getting some energy expelled from him. And I will also say I don't think I could have done travel at the time if I didn't bring him with me.
Yeah.
Because I just needed something from home with me as well. You know, it was nice being in my trailer because it was ours. I could, you know, decorate and do whatever I want with it. My Shepherd, I just took him to work with me. He would just, you know, be in his crate in my truck until I was done, and then we'd go do something together. But my kids, you know, they loved it when I was home, and there was times that I wouldn't come home for at least 3 weeks because, you know, we had to change my days to accommodate something else that I could be there for. And then now things are different. You know, I might be closer to home, but I may only have like 2 or 3 days with my kids, and then I'm gone again. And that, especially with my son, has really been difficult now. I mean, there's times where I'm trying to leave to go to work, especially in just Chico, and he is just clinging on to me saying, "You don't need to go, Mom. You can stay home. You don't need to work." And, you know, he doesn't understand that.
Yeah.
And, you know, it breaks my heart, but I mean, there's nothing I can do. You know, I have to go to work in order to pay the bills, and, you know, Christmas is coming, you know, get him, you know, make sure he has a great Christmas and everything else. I mean, last year, I honestly, if it wasn't for them, I would not have celebrated Christmas. It did not feel like Christmas to me, and it didn't feel like Christmas anywhere in Chico. You would go into the stores, and it wasn't the same busyness that you would expect during any Christmas time. And it just seemed like people were definitely down and depressed. And it was also a problem of, you know, people didn't know where to put things if they did buy them because they didn't have a home left.
Everyone was recovering or healing.
Yeah, it just completely changed the dynamic. And we had bought a Christmas tree, a fake one from Costco just before the fire. And we literally thought it was gone because, you know, for a full week, we thought our house was gone because they kept showing our house within the burn zone. It wasn't until maybe about a week later we got a text message from our friends, the ones that did lose their home, that our house survived. And it was only because they had a law enforcement friend that they asked to come over to our house and check on it. And he's the one that took the picture and sent it to them, and they sent it to us to show that our house survived.
Yeah. You know, they say that kids are resilient, and they really are. And I know it hurts now, you know, but your son and you have a daughter, right?
Yes.
And your son and daughter, they're going to look back and they're going to be like, wow, Mom, thank you, you know, because you were so strong and you kept food on the table and you kept the lights on. And, you know, this time next year, I'm hoping I hope UC Davis is listening. You'll be at this position because you are surviving and you're still fighting even after the fire. And because you're keeping those instincts on, you're still doing that. And, gosh, that makes you a hero, and that he will appreciate that. And being a mom of older kids, you know, I know that for a fact because they look back and they will tell you that. So I know it's hard right now, but they will tell you that.
Yeah, I've been told that several times, and I just hope that someday that day does come.
It will.
Amy, thank you so much for joining us today and telling your story. And we wish you luck and prayers for your family and all the families that were affected by the fire. And we really do appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy, and you're busy continue to put things together even a year after this tragedy. Before we let you go, we just would like to know, we ask all of our guests, we would like to know, Amy, what is your why?
I've always wanted to be in the medical field. I think my dad was the biggest reason for that. And I think I'm probably a lot like him. He was a workaholic, went to school, became an RN, top of his class. I remember not being able to see him much. And unfortunately, when he was 41, he passed from a massive heart attack when I was 9 years old. And I think as a result, I wanted to know, like, why was he in the medical field? Why was he so focused on that instead of being with his family? And since doing it, I realized I love helping people. I love, listening to their stories, especially now, and finding out why they're in the situation that they're in, see if there's any way that I can try and help them and, feel better about their situation or make things better in some way, make them feel better. I mean, even if I can't solve all their problems, but just, be that person that, truly listen to them. I mean, there are times that I have patients that at first they're really upset, and I realize that they're holding on to so much pain. And I may have other patients that are waiting for me, but the next thing I know, I'm sitting on this edge of their bed, just letting them pour out on me. And, I appreciate that they actually trusted me enough and felt comfortable enough that they were able to do that. I don't think medicine is just, applying a Band-Aid or making them feel better. I mean, it's the emotional part to it as well. And that's the part that I think is the most important part with medicine. And unfortunately, we don't always have the time to give our patients in order to do that for them. And then as for sleep, it was just another aspect of the medical field that I was able to do this. And honestly, when I was working as an EMT or working as a volunteer in a fire department, I wouldn't be able to have the time to give them that I do now. I mean, I'm with that patient all night long. So they can tell me anything they want when I'm setting them up or during the night or even in the morning. And I'll be there to listen to them.
Pretty important why. Thank you, Amy. Thank you for sharing that with us today. And thank you again for joining us. And again, best of luck and prayers for you and the family.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Sunny, that's going to wrap up today's podcast.
Yes.
It's been a good one. We would love to hear from you guys, so please drop us a review. Let us know your thoughts on today's topic or anything else you'd like to discuss. And we will see you guys next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
You've been listening to Cardium from Aureus Medical with your hosts, Sunny and Matt. We're the podcast that gets to the heart of travel healthcare. To subscribe, access show notes, or to learn more, visit cardiumpodcast.com, CARDIUM podcast.com. Or wherever you're listening, be sure to rate us, review, and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time.